On this episode, two medical mysteries that defied the experts.
I would hold her and her head would kind of flop to the side.
We just knew something was terribly wrong.
We were worried for her.
When Peyton Rule is born with crippling symptoms no doctor can explain, her parents are forced to face a heartbreaking reality.
I had this fear that she's going to have a lifelong problem with this and possibly one day not be able to walk at all.
We were, most importantly, very concerned for our daughter.
Then, Nadine Miller is the picture of perfect health until her vision begins to rapidly deteriorate, and no doctor can tell her why.
I felt like I lost control. My vision is going out.
It was very frightening. I was terrified.
I felt that no one believed me. You think, God, not me. Am I going blind?
When illness strikes, we look to doctors to give us answers. But what if they can't? For these unlucky patients, diagnosis is a mystery.
In the fall of 1996, 18-year-old Amanda Scott was just beginning her second year of college. And more than anything, she was looking forward to working with children once she graduated.
I was studying early childhood education, and my plan was to go into teaching right away after graduation.
Little did Amanda realize that her entire world was about to change when she met Jason Rule.
The first time I saw Amanda was actually on my floor at St. Louis University in college. She popped out of the elevator. I instantly noticed her because she was beautiful.
I would say it was love at first sight. I felt an instant connection with him. We went on our first date and we were together all the time.
It just took off from there. There was nobody else I wanted to date.
A few months into the relationship, we just knew it was a soulmate situation, and so we knew that we were going to be together and that was going to be our future.
We were inseparable going forward from that point on.
The next 2 years seemed to fly by for the young couple. But just as Amanda is starting her junior year, she receives some unexpected news.
I found out I was pregnant in March of 1998. I was 19 years old. This was the biggest surprise of my life. I hadn't planned on that.
I was scared because we were a young couple. We both had a couple semesters of school to go before we were done. Neither one of us had jobs lined up yet.
We didn't know where we were going to live, and so we were frightened by the prospect of having a baby at this young age.
It added some stress to the relationship because there were new worries we had to think about, but I think strengthened our relationship through the uncertainty and stress and hard times that the pregnancy caused.
But they're determined to give their child a good life. And when Amanda goes into labor on a cool evening in October of 1998, they race to the hospital, anxious to meet their little girl.
I will never forget the day that my baby was born. It was a very long day, very exciting. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she was completely healthy. We decided to name her Peyton.
Holding Peyton for the first time was nothing I'd ever experienced before. To see your own flesh and blood, little fingers, little toes, is just an experience you can't describe.
Standing there as a family, the three of us, it was an amazing feeling. We could not imagine our life without her.
The first couple months with Peyton were difficult. We were trying to finish school, both of us, try to find jobs, and also trying to learn how to take care of a new baby. But as far as her health goes, she seemed to be a normal kid, progressing just fine.
It was around 2 months of age that I noticed Peyton was just really kind of weak. I would hold her and her head would kind of flop to the side. Because of my background in early childhood education, I knew quite a bit about development, and I knew at the age babies should be lifting their head and have more neck strength than she had.
Alarmed, Amanda and Jason make an appointment with their doctor.
But the pediatrician dismissed it right away, saying, oh, she's just a floppy baby, she will catch up.
He diagnosed Peyton with hypotonia.
Hypotonia is more commonly known as low muscle tone. While it can be a sign of a more serious disorder, Many children have no other health problems.
The doctor did not prescribe anything for Peyton, just said, give it time. We felt like maybe we're over worrying here, so let's give it some more time and see if Peyton catches up.
Sure enough, 2 months later, Peyton begins to make some progress.
When I saw her lift her head, Peyton was 4 months old.
Relieved that their little girl is finally catching up to most infants her age, Amanda and Jason breathe a sigh of relief. But just 2 months later, they begin to wonder if their joy is premature. At 6 months old, Peyton still can't sit up.
Our concerns started escalating, but we'd been back to the pediatrician a couple times, and he said, it's still normal. Every child is at a different pace, still nothing to worry about. But she wasn't catching up to her peers. She seemed to be falling further behind them. We felt like something wasn't quite right.
Still, Amanda and Jason do the best they can to remain calm and trust the doctor's advice. During that summer, Jason graduates and lands a job as an accountant.
It was hard working all those hours with a new baby at home. I wanted to be there for her. I felt like I was missing certain things.
Going to school while raising Peyton was difficult. I knew I had a long, long day. I would have Peyton and I would have homework that I would need to catch up with. So the evening was very busy, and then I'd have to get up and do the same thing the next day.
A few months later, Amanda finally gets her degree.
I graduated in December of 1999. Peyton was about 14 months old at that time.
Amanda had always had dreams of teaching, but at that point in our lives, Peyton came first. We decided that it would be best that she stayed home with Peyton for the next couple years.
While Peyton is able to sit on her own, she's struggling to hold herself up. Unlike toddlers who are constantly on the go, Peyton doesn't seem to have the strength to move on her own.
When I put Peyton on her stomach, she would basically just lay there, and she would cry from morning till night.
Peyton always required a lot of attention at home. Because she lacked strength, she always needed help getting around. We always had to be right there for her when she was sitting somewhere because she could fall over real easily.
The doctor suggested that Peyton start physical therapy at this time. And we did physical therapy.
But we just weren't seeing the progression we needed to see.
By 14 or 15 months old, Peyton was still not walking. She was trying to stand up on her own, but at that age, if you looked at other children, they were already walking, and some were running at that point. I had this fear that I was going to be carrying her or really helping her into kindergarten. And I just wanted her to be able to run and play like the other kids and not to feel different. And I just knew that was going to be hard for her, and that maybe her whole life was going to be hard.
When Peyton first tried to stand up, she was very, very wobbly. Amanda and I felt helpless watching Peyton try to do certain things.
Worried about their daughter, Amanda and Jason check back in with their pediatrician, but he assures them that Peyton is just a late bloomer.
We kept thinking she was going to take her first steps and start walking, but this went on for quite a long time, and she just kept falling. We kept watching and watching for her to develop and get stronger, and it just wasn't happening.
But finally, in August of 2000, the day they're waiting for arrives.
Peyton was around 22 months old when she finally took her first steps. I'll never forget that day. We were very overjoyed.
She took about 3 steps across the room from one of us to the other. She was very wobbly. Her gait was very wide, but you could see the smile on her face that she was able to do it. It was a big day. I felt like this was another milestone where she'd start catching up with other kids.
It's a momentous occasion for Jason and Amanda as they watch their daughter take her first steps, and it inspires them to make their relationship official.
We were married in December of 2000. At that time, Peyton was 2 years old.
The day of the wedding was a beautiful day. We were surrounded by family and friends. Peyton was the flower girl, and she was able to walk down the aisle. She was unsteady, but it was kind of a short trip, and she made it without any falls, luckily.
I remember standing up there thinking, please don't fall, Peyton, please don't fall, and she made it. Amanda was beautiful, Peyton was beautiful. It was a special day.
It was just a great thing to finally be committed to each other through marriage.
The young couple is happier than ever. But just a few weeks later, while Amanda is playing with Peyton, a terrifying new symptom suddenly sets in.
She was reaching for a stuffed animal and her hand just had a slight tremor to it. Like she just didn't have the strength. My gut feeling at this moment was that there could be something more wrong with her.
So Amanda called the pediatrician to tell him about Peyton's hand tremors, and his response back was, once again, it's no big deal. It's part of this low muscle tone. Nothing to worry about.
This was very frustrating for us. And that's when we decided we really, really needed to get another opinion.
Unfortunately, his diagnosis was the exact same. He said, don't worry, she's got low muscle tone, she'll catch up.
When the second doctor said the same thing that the first doctor said, we were so frustrated. We were trying to figure out what was happening with our daughter, and no one was giving us an answer. Peyton was past 3, and she was still very, very unsteady with how she walked. She would fall often. That was heartbreaking to think that this could be happening to her all the time.
Over the next few years, Jason and Amanda relentlessly take Peyton to one specialist after another. But they all dismiss the bizarre hand tremors and Peyton's lack of coordination as low muscle tone.
I was in preschool and we would do a lot of climbing, and all my friends were like, oh, come on, Peyton, And I was like, no, I can't do that for some reason. I'm not really sure why.
I could tell Peyton was frustrated by not being able to walk. She just kept going, but I could tell that there was some frustration in her.
As a father, I felt helpless. I felt like we weren't getting what Peyton needed for her at that time.
No one was listening to what we were trying to tell them. We were worried for her.
Three-year-old Peyton Rule has never been able to take more than 5 steps without collapsing onto the floor. Even more frightening, her hands shake anytime she tries to hold something. Every doctor Peyton has seen is confident that she simply has low muscle tone and in time will begin to gain strength. But her parents, Jason and Amanda, aren't buying it.
Emotionally at this point, Amanda and I were drained. We spent the last 3 years trying to figure out what was causing our daughter's symptoms. We thought that someone out there has to be able to help us with this.
Desperate for answers, Amanda combs the internet and finds Dr. Ann Connolly, who specializes in children with motor skills problems.
My first impression of Dr. Connolly was she was very good with Peyton and seemed to take a genuine interest in Peyton and figuring out what was wrong with her.
She was having difficulty walking, and they thought that it may have a neurologic basis. On her examination, the most obvious thing was that most of her weakness was in her hands and her feet.
I love Dr. Connolly. I think she's great. She's very cool for a doctor.
Dr. Connolly runs a battery of tests to see how well Peyton's nerves are communicating with her muscles, and quickly reaches a conclusion.
When Peyton's nerve conduction results came back that there were some abnormalities in her nerves, we finally felt we were getting some answers to what was going on with her.
Our best diagnosis was that this was CIDP.
CIDP, or chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, is a rare neurological disorder in which the immune system attacks the nerves, causing muscle weakness, especially in the arms and legs. Luckily, it can be treated.
Most people are pretty happy when I diagnose them with CIDP because it has a really good chance of being treated. Most children respond to one of the medicines. Even if they're not completely cured, they're made markedly better.
I remember the day they told us Peyton had CIDP and that they could treat it. It was a very, very happy day for Amanda and I. We felt like finally we found out what's wrong with our daughter, and even better, we can fix this.
Jason and I embraced, and it was it was a very happy moment for us because after all these years, we had such a hard time figuring out what's going on, and finally someone gave us an answer, and it was a great answer. No longer did we have to look into her future and see that she was going to have so many troubles.
Dr. Connolly immediately starts Peyton on an intense 6-month course of the treatment, which will allow her damaged nerves to heal.
2 times a month, Peyton would go to the local hospital and be hooked up to an IV for 8 or 9 hours.
The treatments themselves are very tough on Peyton. She has a very big aversion to needles, and they'd have to stick her every time. And so she was always very scared going over there.
As a little kid, I hated needles. I did not like them at all. I always felt really confused why they kept sticking me every time I went to the hospital.
We would go back to Dr. Connolly periodically to do muscle tests on Peyton to see how her progression was.
If she had CIDP, I would have liked to have seen a change even by 1 or 2 months. But virtually every child who's going to respond would have responded by 6 months, and Peyton did not.
Dr. Connolly was surprised. She indicated that the treatments weren't working, and she determined that Peyton, in fact, did not have CIDP.
We were heartbroken. We just really thought that this was the answer for her, and it was hard to accept that possibly this wasn't. We felt very let down at this point.
We were very sad, very frustrated, and most importantly, very concerned for our daughter. We thought we had this fixed, and now we have no idea what's wrong with our daughter.
Determined to get to the bottom of their little girl's case, Dr. Connolly begins to review her file once again. And soon she has a new theory. Peyton may be suffering from some type of genetic disease.
We decided to test Peyton's blood for abnormalities in 6 different genes.
So we waited, and finally the blood test results came back, and Dr. Connolly knew right away what the results meant.
When the blood test came back, we knew that Peyton had CMT, or Charcot-Marie tooth disease.
Charcot-Marie tooth disease is a genetic condition that affects the nerves. In a healthy individual, nerves are surrounded by a substance called myelin, which helps transmit vital information to the body, including the muscles. But in patients like Peyton, for some unknown reason, the myelin does not form properly, and the nerves get damaged. Essentially, they are unable to send proper signals to the muscles. As a result, patients lose control of their movements.
CMT is a disorder of nerve. There are many forms. Nerves are like telephone wires that go all the way out to your fingers and all the way out to your toes. And it tends to affect the nerves furthest away first. So the way CMT affects people is that it causes weakness first in your feet and in your ankles, and with time it can affect muscles up closer to your body. Right now we have no cure for CMT.
I think we were in shock. It was very hard for us to realize that here we go from Peyton being treated and the problem just going away to she's going to have a lifelong problem with this.
When my parents told me that I had CMT, it was definitely confusing and kind of like, what? What are you talking about?
Dr. Connolly goes on to explain that all of Peyton's symptoms are directly related to the condition, from her difficulties walking to the hand tremors she often experiences.
Her symptoms from the time that she was born started to all kind of come together for us.
Her wobbly walk, her balance trouble, it all made perfect sense.
Unfortunately, the disease is usually progressive. As her nerves become more damaged, Peyton will increasingly lose control over her body.
She may ultimately lose the ability to walk. Doesn't mean that yet, but it may mean that one day.
We could not believe that that was going to happen to our little girl. Peyton does understand some of what could happen. I think she maybe doesn't believe that she may be in a wheelchair one day. We try not to focus on that. We try not to say that that's going to happen. She knows it's progressive, and so she knows that it could be part of her disease.
When I asked why things were happening to me, my parents said, your body doesn't work the way that some other people does. I was frustrated because I don't want to be treated differently than other people.
In 2008, 43-year-old Nadine Miller was living her life to the fullest in Detroit, Michigan. More than anything, she and her husband loved watching their 2 teenage sons, Joshua and Daniel, grow up.
My kids are my life, and there's nothing more that I enjoy doing than getting in the car and taking them somewhere. We'd go places like the Science Center, birthday parties, programs at the library, the symphony, the museum.
Nadine, she's the love of my life. She's very intelligent, good wife and mother. Nadine had a very good work ethic.
I worked in the scheduling office of the facility that treats cancer patients. I enjoyed doing what I did. Never missed a day.
Life is good for the Miller family. But in the fall of 2008, Nadine begins to slowly realize something strange.
Towards the end of September, I'm really straining to see. When I took the eye pencil or the lipstick and tried to read the color that it was hard for me to see. And I noticed that I had difficulty putting on my eye makeup.
When we received mail, she would have to really squint really hard in order to see it. Anything dealing with reading, she had difficulties with.
Alarmed by the sudden change in her vision, Nadine checks in with a local eye doctor.
I told the receptionist at the desk I have an appointment with the ophthalmologist. Mind you, I can't see well enough to even sign myself in. I told him, I said, I'm having difficulty seeing. My vision is going out. I can hardly see you. I don't know what's going on. The doctor then checked my vision. At that point, he said, I'm gonna order an MRI for you. I called my husband and said, I don't know what's going on.
I just thought it was just something short term and that it would pass.
Nothing could have prepared Nadine and Willard for what the test reveals.
The MRI showed some abnormalities, some inflammation of the optic nerve, which could indicate sarcoid in the eyes. I was very scared.
Sarcoidosis causes swelling in different areas of the body, most commonly the lungs, eyes, and skin. In severe cases in which the eyes are affected, patients may lose their vision.
I was terrified. My wife is only 43 years old, and for her to contract something like this now, it's very frightening. I was terrified.
You think, God, not me. Am I going blind?
Just 2 weeks ago, Nadine Miller's vision started to rapidly deteriorate. Now her doctor believes she's suffering from sarcoidosis, a condition that's causing acute swelling in her eyes.
It's just a sad feeling for me to see my wife like that. She could not see people's faces.
In fact, Nadine's case is so severe, it's imperative she undergo a round of intense drug therapy immediately.
I was in the hospital for 4 days, getting a dose of steroids every 12 hours. And by the 4th day, my vision was very clear. It was like back to normal. The following Monday, I returned to work, business as usual.
She could see, she was happy, her spirit was uplifted, and she could read again. She was normal, and that was a great feeling.
While the doctor is hopeful that Nadine is in the clear, he warns her that sarcoidosis is unpredictable. It could come back at any given moment. And sure enough, just 2 weeks later, Nadine is faced with a frightening relapse on her way to work.
It started to get very difficult to figure out the color of the traffic lights. So I tried to avoid that by just getting on the expressways. Even if the expressways were jammed, I would still get on. I just stayed in the slow lane. All I can say is by the grace of God, I got to work. I told my supervisor, I said, look, I gotta go to the doctor. My vision is diminishing.
I had to go to her place of employment to pick her up. She came out the door And she literally almost got into another person's car. And that was really scary. So then we rushed to the hospital.
Once again, Nadine endures another high dose of steroids.
Upon discharge from the hospital, my vision returns to normal, sharp and clear. But instead of the steroids lasting like they did when I had my first attack, the steroids are starting to lose their effect.
And when Nadine pushes the doctor to rethink the treatment plan, he encourages her to give the steroids a chance to work.
I would think that the doctors could figure this out. I'm starting to get a little impatient. I'm angry, and I was dependent on people. We've always had reading time together. I said, Mom's not able to read this, so why don't you read it to me?
Her vision was getting worse. She was not allowed to drive after that point. Everywhere she had to go, I took her there.
I'm in my 40s. I'm not supposed to stop driving.
So I had to take over. I cooked for the boys. I took them to a bus stop, helped them with their homework, and did all the things, well, almost all the things that she did. But I couldn't do them nearly as well, of course. And it was really becoming frustrating for me because I had never been in that role before. But even more important, I really felt for my wife.
I guess I felt like I lost control, you know. You feel like the rug was just pulled out from under your feet.
Over the past 6 months, Nadine Miller has been slowly losing her vision. Her doctor is confident that she's living with sarcoidosis, a chronic condition that seems to be destroying her eyesight. But just when Nadine begins to wonder how much more she can take, a terrifying new symptom begins to emerge.
I get up to use the restroom, and I go in the kitchen, and I'm seeing all kinds of colors. When I opened up the refrigerator, I'm seeing just blobs. It appears as though they're floating all over the kitchen. And I'm crying and screaming.
Horrified by the bizarre visions, Nadine and Willard rush to the hospital. An hour later, the on-call doctor orders a series of tests, hoping to pinpoint what caused the mysterious hallucinations.
And they said, well, we've checked everything. The only thing we could do now is make a referral to see a psychiatrist. I was very hurt by that. I felt that no one believed me.
When the doctors didn't know what was wrong, I know she had to really feel frustrated and upset and just terrible about the whole situation.
Unsure about what to do next, Nadine does the best she can to grin and bear the frightening visions that seem to come and go at will.
I tried not to even look out the window, because every time I looked out the window, I saw something that just was not there. It was very difficult to get through days like that.
Overwhelmed, Nadine begins to call in sick on a regular basis. It's a trying time for the family, especially since they rely on her paycheck to help cover the bills.
They told me that, Nadine, you're gonna have to stop working. We're gonna place you on a disability simply because you're unable to do your job. I wanted to cry, but what could I do?
It was very difficult for Nadine to be told that she could not work anymore. She was a good worker. Her sight was that bad where she could no longer do it.
Desperate for answers, Nadine schedules another appointment with her doctor, and she urges him to reconsider his diagnosis.
The doctor did say that we don't know if we have this exactly figured out, and he ordered an MRI. Once again, the MRI showed some type of inflammation.
This time, the amount of swelling around her optic nerve and in her brain has doubled.
And at that point, he didn't know exactly what was going on. I agreed to have this biopsy of the brain to find out exactly what was triggering these attacks.
But the procedure, called a craniotomy, is a gamble. There is no guarantee that they will find anything, and there's a high risk of brain damage.
When Nadine went in the hospital for her craniotomy, I was very nervous and I was very concerned about her.
My family, they were scared because they thought, you know, this is my wife, this is our mom. Are you going to be okay? I was nervous. Will my vision come back?
Over the past 6 months, Nadine Miller has lost most of her eyesight and is now suffering from frightening hallucinations, despite repeated steroid treatments that should have helped. At the end of her rope, she has agreed to undergo a dangerous brain biopsy called a craniotomy.
The craniotomy would involve making an incision down the side of my temple and opening up my head. That was scary.
On the day of the surgery, Nadine bravely heads into the OR, where Dr. Robert Tomczak and the medical team take over.
The decision to do the craniotomy in Nadine's case was difficult because it potentially can have serious complications, including death.
Any intrusive surgery like this is very serious. I was scared. I, of course, waited in the surgery waiting room.
After 3 long hours, the doctors pronounce the craniotomy a success, and the biopsy sample is sent straight to the lab. 3 days later, the findings are in.
Based on the results of the pathology test, Nadine was diagnosed with chronic relapsing inflammatory optic neuropathy.
Chronic relapsing inflammatory optic neuropathy, or CRION, is an autoimmune disease that affects the eyes. Normally, the immune system helps to keep infections or any foreign elements in check. But in patients like Nadine, for some unknown reason, immune cells, called B cells, attack the optic nerve. The result is severe inflammation that causes vision loss.
CRION is presumably an autoimmune disease. The body, for whatever reason, starts fighting its own healthy tissue. Inflammation is a general term to describe what the body does when it's injured in some degree. So an example that would be easy to understand would be if I were to accidentally hit my thumb while hammering a nail. We all know what happens. My thumb would swell, and that is really an inflammatory response. So this can occur in virtually any part of the body. In Nadine's case, the inflammation affected the transmission of nerve impulses in her optic nerve. And as a result of this inflammation, Nadine's vision was impaired.
I've never really heard of Crion's disease.
It was relief to know that they have a name to something that I have.
It's now all too clear that Nadine's vision problems, including the hallucinations, were a direct result of her condition.
Chronic progressive visual loss is really the hallmark symptom of this type of inflammation. Visual hallucinations come in a number of different forms, but basically the brain is being deprived of its normal visual input, and then it starts to sort of make up things on its own. The major effect is blindness. If the inflammation ultimately starts killing off the optic nerve fibers, then blindness would be the worst complication.
While there is no cure for CRION, it can be treated with an anti-inflammatory medication. And within 6 hours of receiving her diagnosis, Nadine begins the first course. But CRION is such a new disease that Dr. Tomczak can't predict the outcome of the treatment.
The progression of CRION is not known in terms of long-term prognosis. It was originally described in 2003.
My biggest concern was what if my vision doesn't return?
I was optimistic that she would get better. I had faith that she would be all right.
Almost 3 months after beginning the medication, Nadine's vision starts to gradually improve. Jason and Amanda Rule have just learned that their only daughter, Peyton, is suffering from a condition that will most likely cripple her for life. The 4-year-old has Charcot-Marie tooth disease, a rare neurological disorder that damages her nerves and could ultimately leave her paralyzed.
It was a loss of hope for us, knowing that there's no cure for CMT and that her path is unknown and that it could get worse.
When we were told she's going to have a lifelong problem with this and possibly one day not be able to walk at all, it was very, very sad.
As the worried parents do the best they can to face the grim reality, Dr. Ann Connolly assures them that she can help Peyton live a relatively normal life.
Dr. Connolly prescribes physical therapy for Peyton, and Peyton will continue that treatment for the rest of her life.
There are no specific medications, but one of the types of physical activity that's very good for people who have weakness is swimming. We recommended that she be active in water. It just helps the joints and it helps the muscles also.
Exactly what course the disease will take over time is uncertain. Experts don't know much about the extremely rare form of CMT which Peyton is living with.
I have never worked with a child with this form until Peyton was diagnosed.
Our understanding is that there may be one other person with that particular type, but she is the youngest with that particular type. So the doctors say she has her own disease and she'll kind of show what happens down the line.
Although the Rules are relieved to finally have some answers, they can't help but wonder why so many doctors missed the diagnosis.
Her genetic cause for her disease had only been discovered about 1 year before she was diagnosed. So the science for CMT is very new, and it was simply not possible when Peyton was an infant to make that specific diagnosis.
While Nadine is grateful to finally be on the road to recovery, she can't help but wonder why she had to lose most of her eyesight before landing a diagnosis.
Nadine's case is very uncommon, and there are probably less than 25 cases reported in the medical literature.
I have IV treatment every 6 months. I can say that I am improving. I'm reading. I don't read a lot, but I don't have blurry vision like I used to. I can distinguish colors.
I see our life coming back to the way it was before. Nadine really has improved. She's now on the level where she should be, where she can do the things that she used to do.
Our vision is something that we take for granted, and when you find that you have to depend on other people, it's a humbling experience. And I'm just a lot more sensitive to other people and their needs than what I was before.
I love her, and she's really been very strong going through all the things that she had to go through, and that I'm always here to help her and support her in any way that I can.
My husband and children were very helpful and very supportive. It was difficult, but they hung in there, and I'm very proud of them. They helped out a lot and couldn't have done it without them.